I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by the new Executive Director of Sunbury Shores, Gerald McEachern. Thank you for joining me today, Gerald.
Thank you, Vicki. Nice to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit about how long you've been in this role and what drew you to Sunbury Shores?
I've been in the role since January, so 3 months, a newbie. What drew me to the role, I was actually invited to sit on the board. Art is something that has been in my life for the very beginning. Art's my first language, I think. And sitting on the board was an excellent way of, participating in working with the community, and I thought it was great. And when they laid out what was on their agenda, I said, you probably need me as an executive director more than a board member, and that's how it turned out.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you've been involved in many different arts organizations across Canada as well.
Well, my background has been in the creative field for decades. I ran advertising agencies in Ontario, and after moving out here, I've been doing mostly strategic planning and development work in a number of roles. So my most current roles would have been working with the City of Edmonton, for the City of Edmonton, building an in-house marketing agency for them, which was a great 3-year project. One of our kids was having difficulty in Edmonton learning, and so we moved back here. We packed up our jobs and careers out there and moved back here, which is home for our kids. And it was a great move. He's done really well. And the next role that I took on was another community service type of project. The Thunder Bay Symphony had been running deficits for 25 years, and they were about $400,000 in debt. And it was a rolling deficit, so every year they faced the same problem. And I said I could commit 3 years to help solve that problem. And they thought it would take 10 years to pay that down, and it took 3 years, so we did great. And that kind of leads into this. Running the symphony, I think, was a lot like this. So you were working with artistic people, or a music director who has a certain language. My role is mostly brokering that kind of creative vision with how that's going to market, how's it going to work with the community. So there's a direct creative involvement as a team, so that collaboration is very important. And the same sorts of things happen with Sunbury Shores, so it's something I like a lot.
And it's always interesting, I think, with art, it's easy to forget that it doesn't exist in a bubble, that it has to make sense financially, too, to have an organization continue. What are, the challenges? I can tell you from a media standpoint, we face them as a small media outlet.
Yeah.
What are the challenges of operating a gallery and art center in a smaller community?
I'm just learning about that, so I think that's going to be the project. I'm used to not big markets, but certainly bigger markets than this. I know this region quite well. We've been out here since 2004. This is home for us. I understand how community dynamics work here, but the markets are quite different. Mm-hmm. So if you do an outreach to the public in a larger center, the return on that's much greater. And yet the cost of operating a business here is the same as it is anywhere. So you still need to make that money. So the question becomes, how do you do it? That can be tough with a small organization.
One thing that you have done, and I went to visit the gallery just a couple weeks ago, there's now a gift shop in Sunbury Shores that makes for the greatest opportunities when I have friends come visit me here is they want to take home a souvenir from an artist. It might say New Brunswick, but they don't want it to have been made in another country. They want to buy something from an artist who's made something that represents the place with hands from this place. And that's something that has been launched now at Sunbury Shores. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for covering that. That was great. I was surprised. These things are small acts of desperation. So when you're looking at how the organization is going to, survive and move forward. A lot of it's based on donations, but you have to look internally and say, well, what's happening directly on the floor here right in front of you. A lot of what's going on in the art world and creative world in general is people are saturated with all kinds of art, whether it's, broadcast or, entertainment or performances, music. We're living in a different world where we're bombarded with stuff, and our walls are full of art. So art may not sell the same way that it used to sell. Mm-hmm. So I just looked at our space and said, we have empty space. We're in a tourist town. We need to be in that business. Let's begin. And we have people who make things. So it was an easy fit. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it had been thought about before. We did sell some things in the place before, but it wasn't really a concentrated effort. I think that I'd like to grow that space a bit more if we can. It's hard to say how it's going to go. I mean, we haven't opened up to tourist season, so we have local people coming in, and they like it. Mm-hmm. And there's a thing that we're working on that's kind of an extension of that gallery shop, is how do we create what I would call the Sunbury Shores experience. So when you walk in the front door, it's is it a white box or is it something else? And galleries tend to be a white box sort of thing that can be very intimidating to some people coming in. They walk in and go, oh, I've got walls with art on it and a big empty space, and I feel kind of vulnerable, and what's going to happen, I feel exposed and I don't feel invited in. So we put in a new sound system. So when you walk in, there's music playing. We've kind of opened up the space in a little bit different way so that it's more engaging. Our team is more focused on engaging with the public coming in. So instead of letting people just wander through, it's, let's at least say hi and address mm-hmm. them. So there's a kind of a friendlier vibe, I think, that's happening, that's just taking root. I think this takes years because culture starts in a very small way, and what you water and what you nurture is what grows. So I think that sort of positive experience is the thing that's going to drive Sunbury Shores over the next decade or more.
Mm-hmm. And that would be going into your 7th decade. You turn 60 next year?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you think the mandate has evolved? I remember going there when I was a kid. I used to go for a week every summer to do an art course.
Cool.
That was definitely that intersection of art and nature. I would often go on something that had to do with whales and making whale art, but also going out on the ocean. I'm sure at the time it would have been in collaboration with the Huntsman. I just didn't realize it as a young kid. Yeah. How do you take the mandate of the gallery and refresh it for the next generation and the next decade?
Well, I don't know how other people might do it, but I look back. So my first 2-3 weeks was really just going through all the old filing cabinets and saying, what was here? I don't know this place. I mean, I knew it as a casual visitor, but in terms, and my kids went through it. I mean, we watched our kids kind of grow up through that whole Sunbury Shores art class experience like you had, and it was great. But when you look back at 60 years of history and, press clippings and old newsletters and that sort of thing, you get a sense of who those people were and how it came to be, and what the fundamental culture of the place is. How do I see that expressing, and what do I think that mission is? I'm putting together right now with our staff a case for support, which is basically aimed at larger funders, government, and so on. And that story becomes really important. Mm-hmm. For example, I didn't know why it was called Sunbury Shores. Is it the trucking company? I mean, so you learn about what that is. The 2 takeaways on the mission I don't think will ever change, and it's, for me, very, very simple. It's artistic development and education, arts education. And the original mission of Sunbury Shores and Dorothy Eidlitz and the people around her wanted exactly that. They wanted to develop the arts in this community, in this region, and they wanted their kids to learn about art. And kids, it's not just kids, education's broader, much broader, so it's, you know, very old seniors down to very young kids. So it's a language, you know, and I have some affection for that language. It's a different kind of expression, not just words.
I think Sunbury Shores obviously has a reach well beyond Southwest New Brunswick with people's interest in the gallery, but if you live in St. Andrews, it feels very much like it's a part of who we are. I can't really imagine the community without it. Is that how it feels working there?
Yeah. What surprised me was how much of a cultural hub that place actually is. I thought it was in terms of, you know, studios and exhibition space and so on. It's a meeting place for all kinds of people. You know, Eastern Charlotte Waterways has meetings there. Passamaquoddy Lodge volunteers have meetings there. You have this other kind of broader cultural influence, and it's not just St. Andrews, so you start to see it reaching out into St. George and Blacks Harbor and St. Stephen and now Grand Manan, because we're doing remote learning, and you know that through, you know, this place, that outreach is extremely important, and that's our future. I think it won't be so much the mission, but the conveyance of the mission, you know, how we actually do reach out, that's really the important thing. Making more contacts in the region. And the trick there, how do you do an expanding, you know, buffet of things that you want to do with diminishing income? And I mean, I think all small organizations, including this channel, face the same issue, you know?
Oh, for sure. It's I don't think people, and obviously I'm sure Sunbury Shores feels the same way. You like to do everything you can for community.
Yeah, absolutely.
But every once in a while there's that fear of, well, what if this avenue dries up, or what if the grant system isn't on our side, or what if we encounter a new expense? And I know that actually is something you're dealing with at Sunbury Shores, because the last time we saw each other was actually at a town council meeting where you were discussing, and I'd love you to explain this in layman's terms for people at home. There's a new expense when it comes to putting on exhibits, is that correct?
Yeah, art community has evolved over the last 40 years or longer, and it almost goes back to the origins of Sunbury Shores itself, where artists are now more involved in how their work is conveyed across generations. So it's copyright issues, but more than that, who gets to use that artwork once it's sold? This came out of the London, Ontario group of artists back in the late 1960s. So it would be Jack Chambers, who was a realist painter, and a number of other people in that area that started Canadian Artists' Rights, I guess it was, CAR, basically aimed at how do we protect our copyrights over, you know, a number of years. The big problem they had was their art would be purchased, put into a permanent collection in a large gallery like the Ontario Art Gallery, for example. Admission would be charged to see that artwork, and the artist got nothing. And they felt this was a representation of their work that was used in publications without any remuneration for the artist. This has to change. So that turned into CARFAC, which is a minimum scale of fees, kind of like a musicians union scale, that if you're putting on exhibitions of that work, especially if it's not for sale but for public viewing, that the artist is entitled to a minimum fee. We've been paying artist fees to do that, but we don't reach the minimum because we don't have the resources to pay it. But that's becoming a front issue with arts legislation. We're unable to get increased funding if we don't comply to that, so we won't get federal funding. So it's a catch-22. You're caught in the middle, right? If you try to survive and you don't fund it, well, okay, you're able to survive that month, that year, but you're not going to get the longer-term grants that support core funding. Wow. So that's where we're at. It's kind of another one of those, valley of death things. How do you cross it?
Wow. So even if the artist, let's say I've been to many exhibits at Sunbury Shores, and there's often an opportunity for the artist to often be there and also sell the work that's on the walls. That doesn't change the ask of the government in terms of making you eligible.
We've been very cognizant, I think, in the past, that we provide the artists opportunities to sell their work. We have a low commission rate relative to commercial galleries, so we're 5% at least less than what they ask for. So the artist gets, a good portion of the sale, which is great. And we also fund travel expenses and all the rest of that. But in terms of moving that forward, their actual artist fees are quite modest. So it's a great opportunity for younger artists starting out, or artists who have an interest in showing new work that they haven't shown before. We're a great resource for that, but we're only one of maybe 10 organizations like this in the province. I mean, New Brunswick is lucky. It's culturally inclined for a very small population, so we do well as a province.
What can we expect as we gear up for the summer season, which is obviously in St. Andrews, everyone's busy season? What's on the horizon for Sunbury Shores?
Well, we have a calendar we're putting out that's going to be put in the mail.
Okay.
So people can look for it in their mailboxes. But on one side we have programs, and we have 25 or 30 programs that include kids' summer teaching programs. We have artists coming in to teach workshops at a much more advanced level, which is fantastic. And then we have all these events. And when you get this, people out at home, you'll notice all the free events here. And there are so many, it was hard to fit onto this card. And I think understanding the value that Sunbury Shores brings to this region and the support that's required to keep this going is something that takes full-on community engagement. It's I'll leave this with you, actually.
Thank you.
It's something that shocked me because we had not produced a rack card like this in the past that just kind of sets everything out by date. It does far more than I thought, and I've been kind of engaged with the place a bit, from a distance, but I had no idea we did that much, and we do it for very little income, so it's an interesting project.
It's special to have a place in town, especially when you live in a small town, to have an art center that you can just walk into on a Saturday afternoon, especially when it's beautiful as Sunbury Shores, where past the hallways of art, you can also walk straight out onto one of the best views of the bay as well in the back, which is kind of like its own art piece. How can people, if there are people watching this right now and they want to sponsor Sunbury Shores in some way, whether it's making a regular donation, what are some of the ways you encourage people to support the gallery?
Well, first of all, come out and see us. I think that's engagement's really important. The support is really direct. I mean, if someone wants to support us right now in the next 5 minutes, go to our website, go on the donate page and make a donation. It's really that simple. We are sending out a spring mailer along with this events program. In it is a form that, again, this is probably a first-time thing. Okay. Fill it out, mail it in, or go online and do the same thing. A lot of what we're trying to do is not to raise, big donations. Small donations of any type are really welcome. We really would like people to become members, to join in. It's a democratic organization. It's run by its membership. The board of directors is elected from the membership, so membership matters. We're going to be developing our membership benefits over the course of the next year or two, so there'll be added perks coming on with this. So we like this because when you do this and you become a member or you donate, we can actually put you on our mailing list and keep you informed as to what's going on, because a lot of what we don't have is information on the public that supports us. So these are important things as well.
So look for that in the mail.
Look for that in the mail. And I didn't really answer your question before that, what we're doing for the summer. That's sort of wide open. We're looking at new opportunities around just bringing people in and keeping them entertained and engaged with what's going on. I'd like to do more studio tours so people can see what's actually happening in the place. I like what you brought up, access to the back and the beach in the back and our garden. I think the garden is going to be kind of refreshed over the next few months, which is kind of super, and that's a volunteer effort again, so nice stuff.
What will be, I know we've talked about the challenges in a small community, but what do you expect to be the challenges of the role that you're in as you move forward?
Well, the role that I'm in is unenviable. It's just money. I get to do creative things, and I love doing the creative work, which is actually building and marketing an organization, but just finding ways of working through the demographic changes that are happening with us right now. Our donors, very much like arts donors right across the country, including the symphony, they're aging out. They're passing away. The younger generations are not as engaged philanthropically with these arts organizations. So the stream of money coming in is not the same as it used to be. And we're living in a really a time of flux in New Brunswick where a lot of new people are coming in. They don't know about us. They don't know what's being offered. They're getting their balance here and trying to figure out a new place because we've had this huge influx since COVID. So engaging those people and bringing them in is part of the job, and it's not just money in that sense. It's a cultural experience for all of us. So I think culture comes first. The arts are a part of that culture, and the money is secondary to that. It comes if you do it well. And I think for me, it is about money, but it's about doing it well. And if it works, then you're a success. And if the money doesn't come, well, we'll deal with that when it happens, right?
And in a way,
it's been here for 60 years.
You say that your job has to deal with money, but in a sense that kind of puts you in this position where you have to be one of the most creative people there. We feel that way as we navigate the change from cable to digital here at the TV station.
I only have one litmus test for this, and it's, am I bored yet? Well, I'm not bored, so it must be okay,
Now, you talk about the next generation, and maybe they're not quite there yet in terms of their understanding of why they need to support art in different ways. That said, so many of the young people today in this community would have grown up with Sunbury Shores as part of their education system.
Yeah.
How are you continuing that role in the community of being so intertwined with people's early education and experience of art and nature?
We're running full-on arts programs with the schools every year, and that's only getting better from what I can see. So the engagement with classroom kids is fantastic. I mean, and we get support back from Sir James Dunn Academy and elsewhere that supports us being able to do that. So we're really grateful for that. Arts funding in education has declined dramatically over the last 20 years, so organizations like Sunbury Shores make up the difference. I don't think, personally, that the public in general, and I don't mean this specifically to individuals, I think the public in general doesn't realize how valuable visual training really is, or creative training. To understand how to develop ideas conceptually and then to actually make them real is what Sunbury Shores does. Those are the core functions of science, engineering, any of the sort of STEM things that have turned into STEAM because they've added arts back into it. Without those basic skills, kids can't grow fully into their careers and professions, and we're not teaching that enough in schools. If you can think third dimensionally, you can be an architect. If you can't think third dimensionally, you can't even be a good engineer or a medical worker because you can't picture how the body actually functions in third dimensions. That matters. That language matters a great deal to us, and we're losing those things. Oddly enough, in an era that depends more and more on it. I mean, when we look at the whole digital revolution, visualization has really become a huge part of our language, and we're training it less and less. It's just bizarre.
Well, it's nice to see you actually have a course on that right now.
We do, yeah.
Not just digital training, but also tackling issues like climate change with young people. So
that's true, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today, for sharing your thoughts on Sunbury Shores and giving us some insight into your new role. I hope you will come back soon.
I will. I enjoyed it. Thanks very much, Vicki.
My guest today has been Gerald McEachern, Executive Director of Sunbury Shores. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.